With me now, retired Brigadier General and author of Besieged, General A.J. Tata. General, good to see you.
Good to see you, Liz.
All right, General, I'm going to be very blunt here. I don't buy this. This attacker converted to Islam. He traveled to Saudi Arabia to teach English, and then several years later, he traveled back on a pilgrimage for several years at a time. He used a knife in a car, methods you and I talked about last week being very related to the propaganda that ISIS is putting out. This attack was pre-planned. It had all the earmarks of radical Islam on it. Where are the UK police getting their evidence that this was not tied to any Islamist ideology?
I think it's almost like a double lack of evidence. They don't they're trying to be so politically correct here, Liz, and it is really an ideology of political correctness that is crumbling and kneeling before this ideology of ISIS and terror. And for us not to pull together with NATO and the UK, this is the perfect opportunity, as we talked last time, that we've really got to have a serious conversation with the UK, with France, with NATO, and identify this threat, because it's clear he was communicating on WhatsApp, which is a secure encrypted environment. So hopefully they can figure out who the end user was on the other side of that. And so he's talking to somebody, and it could have been his mother, or it could have been a handler. And so this has every piece of circumstantial evidence that any first year law school graduate could walk into a court and most likely make the case. And why the UK police are not calling this linked to radical Islam or Islamic terror is in the face of political correctness, and it is just crushing us in our ability to fight this enemy, because it just gives them another leg up to do this again and again and again.
Well, really what it makes the British police look like, it makes them look like they're incompetent. I mean, it's been a week since this attack. 1 week, and they're already coming out and saying, no, he acted alone, there was no ties to this. When we have all this evidence, I mean, listen, we've talked about this before. ISIS is using a new kind of warfare. They're using these lone wolves. I hate that name. You're the one that brought that up, because they're inspired by this ideology that's coming from the Middle East. But if we're not even competent, and I mean the Western powers, NATO, France, UK, Belgium, United States, if we're not even competent enough to recognize their new strategy, it seems to me that it would just encourage them to keep using this tactic. They don't need to continue to evolve because their attacks are being successful.
That's exactly right. This is asymmetric warfare. And we face this every day in Afghanistan and Iraq back when those wars were really raging. We still face it every day in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. And the enemy takes a look at what our soft targets are, what our vulnerabilities are, and they attack that. They are attacking our liberties, our freedoms, and the places that are most sacred to us, such as common areas of gathering where everybody feels safe. The Thames River, the bridges, and those kinds of things that are beautiful. They're tourist spots. They're collecting places, and they're where people go to. There was a couple that was the Americans that were killed. I mean, there so many people were injured and killed, and it's just Islamic extremism is doing this, and there's no argument about it. And why we have to debate it is chilling, actually.
Right. And those are places of security, I think, when you walk, regardless of what you're doing, if you're going to work, if you're a tourist, if you're protecting that area, those are places of security. They're places that represent to us freedom. That's why these radical Islamists choose to attack them. Another circumstantial, albeit piece of evidence, why this was most likely linked to radical Islamic terror, because this man, Masood, he was a convict. He'd been convicted of violent crimes before. He'd served time in prison, actually, in Britain for them. This was not like his other convictions. This was very different, and it followed his pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia. I mean, do they have any kind of vetting? Is that any type of red flag whatsoever that he went there, he came back a more devout Muslim than he was before?
Right. No, and there is no vetting, and so they get back into the country, and they've gone and they've they've touched the magic, so to speak, and then they come back and do this. And when they go to these places, ISIS has people at in Mecca, in these holy places that try to radicalize you. And so not only is there the ability to self-radicalize over the internet, but when you make these pilgrimages, you can become, a target for radicalization by ISIS terrorists. I'm very disappointed that the London police are saying essentially that this was just a criminal act. It's an act of warfare. We are at war with ISIS, and the more that we downplay this to being just a police matter, the more we embolden ISIS to say, let's keep that thing rolling.
Right, you're right, you're right. It's sad that you're right, but you are. And it stems from either arrogance or fear. They're either too arrogant to say, we don't know, we don't have the facts, we don't have the details of what he was texting about or who he was communicating with on WhatsApp, or they fear. They fear the truth. They fear investigating the truth because they don't want to know the truth. Either way, it puts us all in danger. General, I appreciate being on the show. Thanks for being here, sir.